Welcome back. You're watching The World This Week here on France 24. And full of mirth, of course, is Craig Capitas of Quartz and The Atlantic. Also joining us, Vivian Walt of Time Magazine, and Penkett, freelance reporter, just back from covering the U.S. elections. And freelance reporter and documentary maker, Michael Kirtley. Welcome back to all of you. Let's turn, if you will, to the slew of congratulatory messages Barack Obama received on his re-election. Some going the extra mile, or in this instance, the extra kilometer. François Hollande autographing his French language statement with a literal translation of the sign-off amitié, which he translated as friendly. Comma, François Hollande and Penkett. I know that from your days at the French news agency AFP, this sort of quid pro quo must have happened quite often.
You are the weakest link. You're fired.
So anyway, by the way, there are those like the French, by the way, who gushed praise. And then, well, there's Iran. To cries of death to America this Friday, one senior cleric at Tehran's Friday prayers dubbing the U.S. election an embarrassment and a disgrace.
This fellow took office again. He will continue on his wrong path, and we must fulfill our responsibilities.
Re-election of Barack Obama for the Iranians?
Well, from people who really know about democracy, right? I guess, like we said, not much has changed in 4 days. And obviously this is Obama's priority number one, I would think. Foreign policy agenda has got to be Iran. And until he sorts out what's going to happen there, a whole lot of other things are not going to happen. And all signs point to the fact that he is going to start some kind of direct negotiations with the Iranians, even though everybody says that, you know, he won't, or certainly the administration is keeping fairly quiet about it, but it certainly looks like he'll have to do that sometime soon.
Reason to hope, Anne Penkett?
I think so, yeah. I mean, clearly what we've just seen in Iran, you know, they had to go through the motions, but I'm sure that behind the scenes now that there's movement. The thing is with this, that the window of opportunity is not going to be there for that long, because March being the Iranian New Year when everything shuts down, and then they have a presidential election in June. So essentially, Obama and the rest of the big powers with Iran, they've got, what, 2 or 3 months to try and work something out?
All right, so a short window of opportunity there. Israelis, by the way, have their own campaign on. The opposition warning the incumbent of the consequences of the U.S. result, accusing Benjamin Netanyahu of tacitly endorsing Mitt Romney these past months. Well, the PM responding in kind.
I've heard comments in recent days, coming from among us, that are trying to create conflict between us and the United States. It won't help them. The alliance between Israel and the United States is strong.
Will the Obama administration bear a grudge for all of the missed opportunities and sometimes the defiance of Netanyahu these past 4 years?
I don't believe so. I don't believe so at all. The United States has to work with Israel. The elemental question in this is, are the Iranians willing to give up nuclear technology, stop making atomic bombs? Now, my belief is they are not. I know little of Persian politics, having never covered the place, never been there. But from everything you read and you talk to colleagues who work there, you ask them that question, and the answer is no. Obama does, any leader has to engage, you know, try and see if this can be done. But I can't see how the present hardline military regime in Iran is ever going to give up this dream of going nuke. I mean, if there's a path to that, please tell me. I'm not aware of it.
There's obviously, I mean, Iran has always been absolutely clear and unequivocal about this. And of course, they point to the double standard. You know, Israel is a nuclear power and they're surrounded by nuclear powers, in fact. So why shouldn't they be one as well? I have heard people say that there is some kind of scenario that Obama could work on where you would have international monitors on a fairly permanent basis to keep that nuclear program strictly civilian. Whether Iran will go for that or not is another question, but I guess that is one possibility.
And one final point before we move on, Michael Kirtley, will the Obama II administration have a freer rein to try different things when it comes to such cases as Syria and Mali, where there's that the Islamist insurgency which controls vast swathes of territory?
Well, I think that there are big choices to make, especially as far as Mali is concerned. Syria's encased in lots of political questions that I'm sure are related to everything we just talked about. But Mali, there's the fact that many people in the administration are now beginning to accuse Hakim, Al-Qaeda of the Islamic Maghreb, related to the attack in Benghazi. There seems to be a movement to gain some sort of revenge against that. I know that they're working together with the French to push Algeria to get involved. It's turning into kind of a mess, actually, because if there is an invasion on the part of the ECOWAS forces, and if Algeria stays out, which looks like they will, except in negotiations, and if the French and the Americans are backing them up, as it also looks like it is, because they've got all kinds of drones flying over that area right now, then you have to ask yourself, what's going to happen with those terrorists? You have to ask yourself, is it going to draw more of an Afghanistanization into that situation? Are the terrorists going to flee into the woodwork like they did before? And I feel that Obama has to be very, very careful in terms of how he deals with that. There are ways probably around it to go more softly, but it doesn't look like he's going into it softly at this particular point.
All right, and a final point on foreign policy, the Obama administration announcing the first foreign tour since his re-election coming up just next week. It'll be to Burma, Thailand, and Cambodia. Burma, quite a change, seeing as just a few months ago the regime was a pariah. Meanwhile, the party is on in Beijing. Communist Party staging its once-in-a-decade changing of the guard. As the Financial Times' Jamil Anderlini puts it, this Congress is particularly important because at the end of it, a handful of aging old men with shiny dyed black hair and dark suits will walk out on stage, led by a new president. Before leaving, however, the old one issued a startlingly blunt parting shot.
Combating corruption and promoting political integrity, which is a major political issue of great concern to the people, is a clear-cut and long-term political commitment of the party. If we fail to handle this issue well, it could prove fatal to the party and even cause its collapse and the fall of the state. We must thus make unremitting efforts to combat corruption, promote integrity, and stay vigilant against degeneration.
Could even prove fatal to the party. That's unusually blunt talk.
But he's talking about corruption. That's what he's saying. So he's not suggesting that they're going to be loosening the party control in China. You know, every 10 years we hear this same thing.
Something has to be shaken up, and that something has to be done to stop it.
Yeah, so they'll go after corruption. They'll go after corruption. You know, I just do not see this party, you know, like turkeys voting for Christmas, and it comes around every 10 years. And look at the way they're still going after the people from Tiananmen from 1989. You know, there will be no loosening.
But hold on a second. When the outgoing president makes a statement like that, knowing that there was a big expose in the New York Times just 10 days ago about the billions amassed by his prime minister's family, he must know that it is a form of what they called autocriticism.
Clearly, you do wonder what is going to happen to the former prime minister. Was it 23 billion? It was a huge amount that his family had taken. But and he's not alone. But then this is one of the fundamental flaws about the Communist Party. You know, follow the money. It's totally corrupt.
One senior Communist Party leader on Friday clearly, at least paying lip service to this, Greg Capita, saying that asset disclosure for Chinese officials is slowly to be phased in over time.
Slowly to be phased in over time. Harmonious society. What does slowly to be phased in over time mean? In the old days, he said, back when we watched the Kremlin, you'd listen to speeches and see, for example, how many times Brezhnev might mention the word Stalin, because that might give you a clue. My friends who are full-time sinologists, they listen in to see how many times people mention the word Mao Zedong. And the bye-bye speech that you just heard, I believe, if I remember my conversation correctly earlier today, Mao Zedong's name was mentioned 5 or 6 times. That's a lot of time. The Chinese, as we've said before, the Communist Party is a very, very small clique of people. It does not trickle down to into the society. And there is this other myth in the West that American Western goods going into China is going to help with the liberalization of China. Well, if you listen to the speech, what was said in here is, yes, we want more Western goods, but we want them made in China. They're not, they look upon Western brands, whether it be Chrysler Jeep or Fiat Jeep, whatever it is now, the Jeeps that they weren't going to build in Ohio and Michigan, or whether it's a Gucci bag. They're happy to sell them there, but they want those jobs in China to take care of their own people. You try importing a Gucci bag or a Jeep into China. It's very difficult. There are trade barriers there. And if they do get in, they're exceptionally expensive and very few people can buy them.
So that's going to come to a head. So it's the changing of the guard in China, and you could say in the West, a changing of mores. The U.S. Didn't just elect a president on Tuesday and a new Congress. There were celebrations in Seattle after the state of Washington approved same-sex marriages. Same holds true for Maryland and Maine. And not through the state legislature, through the ballot box. On Twitter, Human Rights Watch saying, it's a new day. Referendum votes for same-sex marriages are a first for the U.S. The French government, meanwhile, introducing same-sex marriage and same-sex parenting on the same day that Spain's top court upheld gay marriage in its country. France, by the way, not the vanguard of the revolution. Far from it. A dozen other European nations put same-sex unions on the same footing as heterosexual ones. And a recent poll found 2/3 of the French approve gay marriage. So it's been a long time coming, so they say, thus splitting the opposition conservatives.
We have seen that gay marriage does not harm society. The government in Spain now says it will not go back on the law. And we realise that the large majority of Spanish public opinion welcomes the law and agrees with opening up marriage and adoption to same-sex couples.
Common sense says that we marry a man and a woman. That's where every being comes from. All the rest is literature for bobos.
Bobos, bohemian bourgeois, I guess is, I don't know how you would use that expression, but...
You're going to love the French for their poetic touch. Yeah.
But do you feel as though with this bill and its same-sex marriage and same-sex adoptions, parenting, do you feel as though the French are ahead of the curve or behind the curve?
I would say they have to be behind the curve. What's so ironic about this, of course, is that Hollande himself has never been married and seems to have some, strange idea against marriage for himself personally. But it seems like this is one of these issues, and we really saw this happening in the US this time around, that finally people just kind of woke up and said, what's the big deal here? It's a little bit like the marijuana propositions that also passed in several states this election in the US, that it's just, unimaginable for people until it becomes imaginable, and then they don't know what the problem was all along. And one can only imagine that eventually France will get that.
You mentioned the president. There was a report in one of the tabloids, Le Parisien aujourd'hui en France, which quotes his entourage as saying, even though it was an electoral promise, he is, quote, unconvinced by it all. There you see the headline, he's reserved when it comes, or mixed feelings, I guess is the better translation, when it comes to gay marriage. Michael Kirtley.
I think that as Vivian was saying, it's kind of a question of timing. In America, you have it's been an organic movement, and people are now beginning to accept the situation. And as you were saying, almost 2/3 of the population in France approves of gay marriage. The real question for me is how to do it. And Hollande has decided that you do it through a law, and other countries, other states in America decide you do it through the ballot box. And it seems to me that that's a very fundamental question, because when you decide to change the status of marriage, or you change husband and wife to spouse, you change different things that haven't existed forever. And so if the French population is going to accept this, it's going to accept it not just because people pass a law, but because, in my opinion anyway, but because they actually believe in it. And it seems to me, from what I've heard about this, about the proposition, I haven't read it yet, but what I've heard about it, there's still a lot of loose ends to work out.
Are you surprised by the unease here in France over this?
I am, actually, yeah. But I think that it's interesting, isn't it, that the popular feeling is, in a sense, in all of these countries, in America as well, and in France, the people are ahead of the governments on these social issues, really. You know, because people have gay friends, and you look at the time that it took President Obama to kind of come to terms with it as well. Like Hollande, after a long reflection, but he had gay people working for him on his staff. And then you see people who have two daddies, two mummies. It happens. It's already happening. So the law should just kind of catch up with what's happening. In the country, I think.
The people ahead of the politicians. We'll leave it with that. And Penkit, I want to thank you. I want to thank Craig Capidis, Michael Kirtley, and Vivian Walt. Thank you for joining us here for The World This Week.